What do you think of the parents that kick their kids out as soon as they have turned 18 years old? They're not Italian, that's for sure. Here in Italy, when the child is finally ready to leave the house at the age of 35, the family gets together to bid them a tearful goodbye before they move 1 kilometer away from their parents' house. It's their right, but I disagree with it. I was kicked out the day I turned 17. I lived out of my car for 3 months while working fast food and completing my senior year. I would have probably dropped out had it not been for my best friend's dad. He found out about the situation and forced me to move in with them. He wouldn't take no for an answer. He had recently got divorced because his stay-at-home wife was cheating on him. Because they had a spare bedroom and I was friends with both his sons that lived with him, he told me it's just us guys living there and having fun. You stay until you finish school. After that, you can pay $100 a month in rent until you decide what to do. Don't argue with me. The man's a saint. I wouldn't have been able to keep going to school without him, and he knew it. He's a guy who had to drop out to work back in the day to support his family. He got his GED and clawed his way up to head engineer at a factory so he could afford a nice home for his wife and kids. He bought a nice 2-story home that he barely got to stay in for a woman who didn't appreciate him. The man even came home every single day and cooked meals for us to make sure we'd eat. In the middle of fighting a divorce, trying to get custody of both of his kids, and keep the house he paid for, he took me in, adding to the stress. He did that for me just because I was friends with his sons. If I ever get rich, that man is getting an early retirement and a comfortable home wherever he chooses. If that man can do all that for someone that isn't his child, parents have no excuse for not helping their own kids out. Edit. I had no idea this would blow up this much. Thank you, everyone. I just wanted to answer some questions that are being asked. This was years ago and I still bump into them from time to time, but we've all drifted apart in these years due to adult lives being busy, lol. I still talk to them every once in a while. They are still my friends and I can hit them all up any time I wanted to. I still play Xbox with the sons a few times a year. I always make sure to have them tell their dad thank you for me. I had a serious heartfelt talk with him about a year after I graduated and moved out. I still think about that man nearly every day of my life. As for my family, I was not a perfect child at all and I have some blame. The thing is, I honestly feel I never would have been the way I was in my later teen years had they been more accepting of myself and my lifestyle. I saw my other friends being able to come to their parents and talk to them without fear of judgment from them, or God. Ultimately, religion is the reason I was kicked out. They are strict Southern Baptist. I did cut my parents out of my life for 3 years after I was kicked out. They never contacted me for the first year. They tried to reconnect after the first year, but I have them 2 more years of silence. I let them back in my life, but on my terms. It was easy to make my demands considering I didn't need them anymore. We now have a healthy relationship. We can finally look each other in the eyes and be honest. I no longer fear their judgment. That's honestly the ingredient we were missing in our relationship. I now spend a decent amount of time with my father and mother. It's funny, my dad and I actually have long conversations about our different ideologies and beliefs. We even poke fun at each other about it. It's nice, considering I never actually was able to connect with him much growing up. I'm the first male in the past 5 generations of my family that didn't become a Southern Baptist pastor. I think my father sees it as opportunity to understand how people living a different life than him are. And I see it as an opportunity to better understand why he did what he did. A lesson I had to learn the hard way is that it's better to seek understanding than to live with hate in your heart. He respects me and I respect him. It was hard for my mom at first. She comes from a small town of 300 people where everyone goes to church happily and believes anything their parents tell them. She would be abrasive with me at first when I would talk about how I drink, or live with my girlfriend. Hell, she still does from time to time. But my father always nudges her into calming down. Edit 2. I keep seeing people say it's not their right, which I understand, but it's not really an argument worth pursuing. As a 17-year-old who just got kicked out, I didn't want to get the police involved. That meant either I move to a foster home an hour or 2 away, and then lose my friends as well as my family. That or they force my parents to take me back and life just gets worse. I was happier living in my car. As scary as it is being a kid on your own, it was better than the alternatives. My BF got kicked out at 18 and his parents literally said to his face, since you were an accident and we didn't mean to have you. We need you out of the house now so we can actually relax like we used to before you were born. Anyway, I think extremely badly of them. Since you're 80, I am gonna need you to die ASAP since y'all never wanted to be around me in the first place. Brother was out before 18 and I was out at 18, and my dad didn't even have a funeral. Should tell you about all you need to know about parents who kick their kids out ASAP. I can't imagine having to deal with that. My dad lost a place to live at his parents' house for the summer his last year of college, and luckily my mom's parents let him stay in their basement. From what my parents told me, my dad was devastated by this. My parents' rule was we would have a place to stay without paying rent as long as we were in school or after we graduated while we were getting our first job. I really appreciated their support and not needing to worry about housing during the summers while I was in college. We'll be doing the same with my 3 kids. Was one of those kids, haven't spoken to my parents in over 10 years. Have no intention on speaking to them any time in the future either. Kicking out your kid as soon as you're legally allowed to do so tells me you wanted them out of the house even earlier, and the only reason you didn't do it is because you didn't want to be arrested. I was one of those kids. The rule in my house was you were out by 18 unless you were still in high school. In that case, you were out on graduation day. I actually turned 18 before graduation, but my mother was exceptionally bitter by that time, so I was forced out before graduation anyway. It was an odd circumstance where I had all the credits to graduate early, but my junior year the state legislature passed a law requiring some civics credits to graduate. As a result, I had to return for my senior year and take 1 class a semester. My mother figured that was good enough. I recall renting a house I could not afford to heat, and living off the scraps left in bus pans under the grill at a Hardee's that I cleaned at night, while still in high school. The reason for my mother's bitterness was mostly due to my father. My father's life was one of tragedy that created the unfaithful man that he was. Generally he was well liked among his peers and acquaintances, humorous and very intelligent, but he was a lousy father who was only around to sleep. There wasn't much talking to be had with him. My mother was in a constant state of rage, and I feared her coming home in the afternoons. Her temper was quick, and she would grab whatever implement was at hand with which to dole out a beating for even the most insignificant infractions. My last beating was at the age of 16 when she sent me to my room and came in with a belt. I stood there taking the first 2 lashes and then I snapped. I swirled around and snatched the belt out of her hand and reared back to beat the crap out of her, but I didn't hit her. I shoved the belt back at her and told her never again, and walked out. Our relationship was extremely strained from that point forward, even until the end when she died of the complications of dementia. On that day I gave her a beautiful death she didn't deserve. On my phone is a voicemail she sent me regarding a family heirloom called a beanpot. How I acquired it is another story. Anyway, in this recording she is upset that an ambulance service sent her a bill for $900, and she would have to confiscate the beanpot as payment since I wasn't around to take her to the hospital. I save that voicemail because it's the nicest thing she said to me in her last 3 years of life. That shared experience took a toll on all of us. My mother was a master at pitting us against each other, and it has only been since her death that a couple of my siblings have finally seen through her schemes. As a result, my relationship with my siblings is best described as cordial. I have a younger brother who died 5 years ago, and an older brother who died last year. The 4 eldest had a somewhat close relationship, having grown up during a time when my parents were still together and my mother had not yet gone full-blown insane. But us 3 younger siblings were raised after my parents' divorce when my mother was a raging lunatic. We were too traumatized to develop bonds with each other. These days, the remaining 3 eldest live with a degree of guilt for having left us 2 remaining youngest behind, and they try to be supportive, but it is as if there is no real trust. I believe the best way to describe the relationships is that me and my siblings are all more comfortable with our respective friends than we are with each other. As for me, life has been a series of triumphs and tragedies. My child is my greatest triumph as she grew up happy, loved, and well-adjusted. My life taught me what not to do as a parent. The tragedies simply make for interesting stories even if they haven't left me in a good place. A girl from my class came home after our grad night party to find 2 garbage bags with her stuff in it. They didn't even tie it so when it rained that night it filled up the bags with water and destroyed her laptop, pictures and clothing. Her parents showed up to her house last year on Independence Day because their house burned down from a firework mishap. I am told the husband just asked them to leave. Oh, I should add they didn't have insurance on the home, so they were pretty much screwed. Great candidates for a nursing home in their later years. Welp. I was kicked out at 16 and again at 18. My mother had no ambitions for work and decided the low to zero income way of life was a good choice to raise 3 kids. Addictions and mental disorders OFC. Anyhow, she demanded $500 per month from me, while I was in high school. At the time, a full-time job at minimum wage would net you about $300 bi-weekly. Needless to say I first had to drop out of school to work full-time to pay her that. Eventually I got back into school, cut back on, and quit jobs until I was part-time and could actually attend school. This caused money to stop coming in. This caused her to be angry. This caused me to become homeless. So now when she asks for help, or simply wants to talk to me, and I don't reply. Well, there you go. There were many other things involved, but if you are a dick to your kids, they will be a dick to you when they are adults. Rightfully so. Yes, I am now a parent, and no, under no circumstances would I do what she did. My older brother was a complete narcissistic asshole. He would hit me often and told me, if I told my parents, he would kill me. He was constantly causing problems with my parents. My father told him that on his 18th birthday, he could have breakfast in the house, but his lunch was going to be on the front porch in a paper bag, so pack a suitcase. My father was true to his word. One of the greatest days of my life. Generally speaking, I'd say those parents don't understand the reality of the current economic landscape and that unless they made a Herculean effort, they probably didn't set their kid up properly to do well. Not to mention that during most of history and in the vast majority of cultures, leaving home at 18 just was not a thing. You generally stayed at home until you married, whatever age that may be, and even after you might still live with your parents or even if you have your own home you'd be very closely connected, often still working the same land together etc. The idea that people are supposed to move out at 18 and make it on their own, when they're still 4 to 6 years from full mental development by the way, is by far the exception rather than the rule historically.